Hi, I'm Jeff Bermudez.
And I'm Omar Kadri.
Welcome to The Collective Journey.
Join us as we explore some of the most promising talents, thought leaders, and change influencers in our city and beyond.
As we uncover these hidden gems, I hope you'll find that they're people just like you and I, with hopes and dreams and gifts that they would like to show to the world.
It is our mission to share their work, to share their story, and to appreciate what our community is capable of producing.
This is my adventure.
This is your adventure.
This is our collective journey. Welcome to this week's episode. Today, we take a look at what it truly means to know yourself. People will often say, just be yourself. Sounds simple enough, but is it really that simple? If it were so easy, why doesn't everyone do it? Our guest today helps us answer these questions. Brandon House is a working professional, a practicing vegan, and is a singer for the Pride Men's Chorus of London. Being a member of the LGBTQ plus community, he is all too familiar with the conflict of knowing oneself. Sometimes, the struggle is accepting yourself for who you are. Other times, it's feeling the need to completely hide your true self. On this episode, join us as Brandon speaks about the unique life experiences that have shaped him into the person that he is today. This is our collective journey, and this is Brandon House.
So my name's Brandon House. I'm 27 years old. I came to London about 4 years ago from Ingersoll, so really close by, for school. I initially went into school for personal support work, and then I'll be continuing that education into nursing in the following September. While here in London, I work at a company called TLS. It's downtown on Oxford and Richmond, above Molly Bloom's, and it's like a company that serves homeowners in multiple ways, home inspections, emergency work on houses, aesthetic work, etc. I'm part of the LGBTQ community here in London, and just recently joined the Pride Men's Chorus of London, Ontario, and that basically is comprised of a lot of men from the LGBT community, whether they're gay, bi, trans, or whatever, anyone's welcome. And that's kind of who I am at my core. I'm also a vegan, and I really like enjoying making food for friends and baking a lot of vegan food with challenges from trying to substitute in things that normally are a bit harder. And my friends at work and elsewhere are always happy to try it too. And so I really enjoy making vegan food for my friends and helping them with any questions they have with it. I always seem to attract questions, as I'm not really a person who tells people they should go vegan. I'm just kind of telling people like what I do, because they always seem to have questions. And
you have an Instagram account, right?
I do. It's called marleyandme.vgn.
And you feature a lot of vegan stuff?
Yeah, so it could be my breakfast, my dinner, my lunch, anything, something baking in the middle of the day. Yeah, that's pretty much who I am at my core, and I just like helping out people, and that's kind of like why I want to go into nursing, and I think it's really easy to be nice to people, and that's kind of how I live my life.
Okay. How long have you been a vegan?
About a year and a half now as a full-fledged vegan.
Really? How was the adjustment?
It was actually not that bad, because before that I didn't eat anything other than chicken, just because I didn't really like red meat growing up, and I just started kind of being grossed out by it, and so I stopped eating it, and it was just a pretty easy adjustment. And then I'm lactose intolerant, so it's really easy to avoid milk, and I don't like eggs, so it was actually pretty seamless. It was probably one of the more easier vegan transitions I hear about.
It's funny that you mentioned you eat a lot of chicken, because I remember you mentioning that you worked at KFC.
That's right. That was my first ever job. I worked there for 5 years, and I definitely ate a lot of the food there while I worked there. And that's actually funny too, because a lot of the weight I gained while I worked there, I became really, really unhealthy actually, and then lost some of that as I kind of went into adulthood. And then when I went vegan, I lost quite a lot of weight, and I just think it's a healthier alternative for me.
Yeah, I certainly understand where you're coming from. Like, I just a curious question. What's up with your arms there? I see the little hospital band and the little
Yep. So
little syringe thing.
I was at the
wrong?
hospital today because I had a migraine, and I've had it for 2 weeks. So I was getting to a point where it was hurting to move my eyes. So I had to go in, and then they actually told me that because I had a fever 2 weeks ago and a headache at the same time, that they're worried it could be meningitis. So they recommended that I get a lumbar puncture and drain spinal fluid. And,
wow.
That's severe.
but the doctor said that it's probably not that, because if it were meningitis, it's the viral kind, because if it was bacterial, I would have been dead by now. Because it kills you in 24 hours.
It's kind of
And
weird.
yeah, so that's just, I didn't want it to start bleeding again, so I left it on.
It's the second time today I heard the word meningitis. I don't know why.
Interesting.
Like we were talking about it earlier in
I
class.
thought you donated blood.
Yeah,
I
that's what
can't
I thought
actually
too.
donate blood because gay people can't donate blood in Canada.
What?
Yeah, you
Is
have
that
to-
actually true?
Yeah, it's true. You can't donate blood unless you've been celibate for a year,
Why?
because they
Like, like, is there a justification behind that?
say it's because gay men are at a higher risk for HIV. And it is partly true, but it is also really based off stereotypes where it kind of dips into gay culture, where there's a stereotype that, I mean, every stereotype I feel is kind of comes from a kernel of truth, but yeah, it's definitely blown out of proportion, where like they say like gay men, like they can't be faithful, they're always messing around, they're
Yeah.
always one house every night type of thing. So because of that, they assume we're at a high risk, and then they just, I don't know. It's weird though, because when you donate blood, you have to pick a sticker. Whether they ask you, they're like, I'm going to leave the booth. There's a yes and no sticker that you literally peel off and you put on your blood. But the yes or no, they stay. And the thing that you peel off is actually just a barcode. You put that on your own pack of blood, or on a piece of paper actually. And then they later scan it to see if you want that blood to actually be used, or if you came there to get like a free test, or like instead of going to an STI clinic or a doctor, you go to give blood. But it's actually because if they find something in your blood, they have to call and tell you. So I think it's to mitigate how much work they have to do in the end. If suddenly a bunch of HIV positive men came through and started donating blood, then it'd be a lot of work for them testing all. It's a lot of use of resources when it's not blood they can use in the end. But
That makes sense, I guess.
so it makes sense in a sense.
But do you still feel it's like a form of like systematic discrimination?
I don't know if I feel like it's intentional discrimination, but I feel like it's maybe not something that they feel is important enough to address faster. I know that it just recently was the time allotted was brought down from like, you can't, if you're gay, you can't. If you've had sex as a gay man, you cannot, to down to a year, which some people view as an improvement, but it's like, you know, like what adult is going to stay celibate for a year just to give blood? And then there's people that say, why not just lie? Don't say you're not gay. Well, what? No. Like, why would I hide who I am? Like, yes, it helps people, but like, you kind of have to like give up part of who you are for a minute, and that's a really not great feeling, because like that's how a lot of us start off our life, like being in the closet and feeling like we're not accepted. So why dip back into that? Just, yeah, it saves a life, but like,
I can
it's
definitely
kind of a
imagine.
battle there.
I can imagine like that must feel really frustrating, because you just want to help people in the end, right?
Yeah, it is true, especially as somebody who wants to go into nursing. Like, I definitely would love to be able to give blood. And it's actually funny too that I realized like a lot of people don't really realize that there's that stipulation, because at one point at work they do a lot of work with blood donations at my work, where anybody can go and they'll bring a van, like a Blood Canada will bring a Blood Canada van to our work. They'll shuttle us to the hospital or wherever they're drawing the blood, and they bring us back to work. And at one time, a coworker called across the floor, like, "Hey, did you want to donate the blood?" And I just literally responded, like, "I can, I'm gay." And then they all kind of laughed, thinking I was being
Wow.
dramatic. And then I was like, "No, like, I'm serious. Like, you can't."
That's really interesting.
Would you consider that policy one of those cases where correlation doesn't necessarily equal causation?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a high correlation, right? But it doesn't mean that
Yeah,
you're gay and
Yeah.
your blood is dirty.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you see any merit to it?
I see merit to it, the fact that it probably does relieve a lot of stress, and maybe not stress is the right word, but it removes a lot of extra work on people who are going in and abusing the system. I'm assuming that's why that's in place. Like, I can't really think of another reason. So I think it has merit that way. But it definitely sucks for people who aren't HIV positive.
You have tattoos as well. Do you think that compounds it?
There is actually a rule that if you get a tattoo, you have to wait a certain period of time. I think it's 6 months.
Wow, I didn't know that either.
Or
There's
a
so
year.
many new things learning about blood
Yeah.
donation today.
Yeah.
Have you ever donated blood?
Me, no, I've never really given it any thought, to be honest. I mean, like, I'd be down. I don't know if it's like, does it like hurt you or something, or?
No.
It hurts.
So your body produces blood through your bone marrow. So that's what generates your blood cells, and then so that you can only donate a certain amount at a time, because without you're removing blood from your body, and you have to give your body time to replace it or else you could get sick.
I get what you mean. I understand. Now, you're saying that this stipulation, like, you know, obviously it affects the way you feel as a gay person.
Yeah.
Like, are there other examples of things that someone like might not know about that makes you feel the same way? Other forms of systematic discrimination, or I guess.
I think Canada is honestly pretty good about that, and especially London. It's a pretty LGBTQ friendly place, and so I can't really think of anything. That there's always going to be your those kind of like going into like bars that aren't specifically designated as a gay bar. Like, there's always a fear of going in there. For some people, there's, it could be as simple as walking into a group of strangers you don't know, getting into a cab. Like, I personally don't have those fears, but I definitely know that people feel that way. And even here in London, that there is also there's people out there that definitely have fears that, like, because of who they are, and this doesn't just apply to gay, it can be any of the LGBTQ2 plus, and it could be a race thing, it could be because they're Arab, it could be they're brown, black, anything. So I think those things still exist, and there's a lot of work to be done still, but we're definitely at an okay place right now.
So you don't have these fears anymore. Have you had them previously?
Oh, definitely, yeah. Especially when I was in the closet. Before that, there's always the fear of getting caught, of people not wanting to be around you, not liking you, loving you. Like, I personally felt like my family would abandon me, to the point where I actually chose to come out while I was in England, living in England for a little bit. We have family there. So I thought, well, if I just come out here, like, then I won't go back.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, I'll just call my mom from England, and then if everything goes south, then I'll stay here. And so.
When did you first, know for sure that you were gay?
Yeah, so when I was in grade 7, I feel like is when I had the conscious realization, and I don't know if that's because in between grade 6, grade 7, I learned what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I learned the words for it. But I remember in grade 7, I knew that I wasn't straight. Like, I remember I knew the words for it. And I do remember, I think I told myself I was gay in my head, but then I think I told friends I was bi, so I'd still be half normal. And that continued up into grade 9. And then end of grade 9, I think, is when I told friends I was gay, like close friends, inner circle.
Mm-hmm.
And then I didn't tell my parents, though, or I should say my mom, because I made my mom tell my dad.
So you were never full on in the closet. Like, you always had a little bit of a support group, you would say?
From grade I think the only person I told that I was gay was another gay person, but I feel like I didn't even tell them until grade 9. So I think grade 6 to 9, I just kept it to myself. And that was mostly probably just ignorance of the whole culture myself, and not really understanding what was going on, because there was no education about it at that time. There was no role models. There was no Troye Sivan. There was no pro athletes and all that. There was none of that. So and if there was, it was oh, look at that person, what a shame. So there was nobody like that back then. So it was definitely just don't say anything, because it's not going to be a good reciprocation.
It's kind of like you're a mutant.
Yeah, exactly.
So prior to that, or even during that period that you would consider yourself in the closet, Did you ever form romantic relationships with girls, either just because that was the thing to do as a guy, dictated by society, or just to appear normal, so to speak?
I definitely did. Yeah. I remember her name too. I don't know if I should say it. Should I say?
You can say that. You don't have to out her if you don't want.
Nah, like I don't even think. No, her name was Audrey actually, and I remember like feeling like I really liked her, but I think I probably liked the idea like, well, if I like her, then it means I'm normal, like, and my parents will still love me. So, so that was. Yeah, I had a girlfriend, and then she dumped me for her ex-boyfriend. And I remember I was sad about it, but I think I was more sad that, again, it was like my loss of like normalcy.
Yeah.
And after that, though, that was my first and only girlfriend.
So it says you're saying that you had a fear of your parents finding out. What was it about your parents finding out that made you feel so afraid?
The fear is that they would find out, and being gay or bi or whatever is a bad thing. And because I am this bad thing, I was going to be kicked out. I was going to be not loved. Like, that was the worst fear. Like, I would have nowhere to go. Like, that was the fear.
And did that fear stem from like the fact that are you from like a traditional background, or did you just look at media and see that, oh, gay people are persecuted in media, therefore I'll be persecuted in real life?
I think it was a mix of both. I was brought up in the church, and so we weren't forced to go to church every Sunday. When we were younger, I remember we had to go very often, and then it slowly petered off, and then I remember we didn't go, but it was still like our family believes in God, and I definitely knew that being gay or whatever it was a sin, and so then of course media, and I don't really remember how I would have known that, because I don't necessarily remember any negative media back then, because also media was so young back then too compared to now. So I think it was just like a general like learnist, like that's just like what I learned, that it was taboo and not good, and you hear it from, I think it was mostly school too, like being called like slurs and whatever. So I think that's where the fear comes from.
So how old were you when you decided to come out?
18.
18.
Yeah, and I remember specifically it was 18 because I was in England, and the drinking age there was 18. So, and I remember, and that's how I put all the pieces together these 10 years later.
How did that process go?
So the process went as follows. The family I was staying with was actually even more religious than my family, and it was a huge, huge taboo. They were Jehovah's Witnesses, or they still are.
And they don't like donating blood either.
Yeah. So they, whether they knew it or not, they didn't say anything to me, but then my cousin Simone, who I still talk to this day, and we take turns going back and forth to England and them coming to Canada. We were at a wedding one night, a friend's wedding, and we were after the ceremony, and everybody was drinking. It was a great time. And I stepped outside of the party for a second. Maybe it was warm or something, and she just came up to me and she was like, like we know. And I was like, what do you mean? And she was like, that we know you're gay. Like, and she told me that her mother, who I just called my aunt while I was there, even though she's technically my cousin, but because of the age, it was just kind of a respect thing. And I was staying there, and it would have been weird to call her a cousin. So anyways, she told me that they all knew, and that I should tell my parents, because the church that we were brought up in, she told me that they apparently they accept gay people, and I was like, oh, and I remember that. I was like, oh, this is great. Like, now I can get married in a church. And so she's like, you should call your mom tonight and tell her, like, when we get back to the wedding. I don't think I did it that night because we got back really late, but I think the next day or two, my sister already knew. My brother didn't. And so I messaged my sister, I think on Facebook or something, and I said, I'm going to call mom and tell her. And then I said, I'm going to message Ben, my brother, and tell him on Facebook. And then she said, yeah, okay, that sounds good. Like, don't worry, everything's going to be okay. So my sister was really, really good that way. And then, so I messaged my brother on Facebook, and I was actually really nervous about what he said, because him and I used to fight all the time. And back then it was like the go-to, like, name calling to use, like, the slurs for, like, homosexuals and all that. So he would call me that up and down, and I would call him that too. Like those were just the go-to because I was trying to play the part.
Mm-hmm.
So he,
Like the F word?
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And so I messaged him on Facebook. I remember, it's funny, I remember actually maybe a month ago trying to go through all these 9 years of Facebook messages to get back to that point. I wanted to take a picture, I couldn't get to it. But he just said, okay, thanks, yeah, love you. And I was like, oh, okay, like that was awesome. And then I was like, I'm going to tell Mom tomorrow. And he's like, don't worry, like it's going to be fine. And I was like, okay. And I remember too, like from that, I don't think my brother and I have ever had a fight since that point. Like before that, we used to fight like cat dog, and that since then, like it's just been like nothing. So that was a pretty cool experience for my brother and sister, them being like completely okay with it, not a problem at all. And then, so the next day or a couple days later, I called my mom. It was like 2 or 3 a.m. in England. It would have been like 10 p.m. here. So she was cooking, I remember she was cooking spaghetti sauce for the next day's dinner that she told me. So, hey, what are you doing? And then, let me talk to Beth. And then I was like, I can't do it. And she's like, if you don't do it, I'm going to do it. And I was like, you can't. She just did it. I don't think she would have. She just did it as a scare tactic. And then I talked to my brother really quickly. He said, yeah, it's fine. Hand the phone back to my mom. Let me talk to Beth again. And then it was, let me talk to my mom again. And then my mom at that point was fed up. She was like, Brandon, what is it? Like, I'm making spaghetti. And then I was like, I just remember, like, time stopped. I couldn't breathe. And then it just said, I'm gay. And then you feel like you hear about it, but, like, you feel the weight come off your shoulder. And she said, I know. And I was like, what do you mean you know? And then started crying, of course. And so then there was tears both sides. And then she said, like, there's nothing, of course, I could do to make her ever stop loving me. And I'm really thankful for that, especially these years later, because there are tons of people who don't have that experience. Like, there's people who do get kicked out of their homes, ostracized. And you hear about it all the time if you know where to look. And even sometimes it just pops up, Facebook feed, whatever. So it still happens, unfortunately. But so she said it to me, and she told me that she knew I would tell her when I was ready, and she's known for years. And
that's very interesting.
Yeah,
that's a very that's cool.
So can you describe the difference then of your quality of life, being in the closet, not being able to fully be yourself, and posts coming out where you can fully express yourself, you can be who you are, because that's a very underrated feeling.
It is underrated, because I think even back then, like I think I think you can say this in many different flavors, I guess you can say, but like being gay, like I know, and so does every other gay person and bi person and lesbian person, that like it's not a choice. Like we know, like it's just a feeling. Like you're not making it up. This is the way you are. So that's why it's so hurtful when people tell us it's a choice, or tell us that it's a sin, or tell us that we're horrible people, or there's hate crimes. It's like because like you're killing us for who we are, or you're beating us up for who we are. So to go from feeling like you're hiding such a big part of yourself to like, I remember an active thought of saying to myself, like, I will never be able to like get married. I'll never be able to introduce my mom or parents to like a boyfriend or a husband. If like, am I gonna have to get secretly married? Like there were so many questions. And then to after, where it's like a complete freedom. And I remember too, at that point, I didn't care who at my high school knew, because I was like, well, it doesn't matter what they think. Like my parents know and they're fine with it, so what does it matter? But before that, it was a secret from everybody. But then after your parents know, like I think my main worry about people at high school finding out was that it would somehow get back to my parents. So
like once your parents found out, it's like
what does it matter?
You have nothing to worry about anymore.
Yeah, it's like what does anyone else think matter?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And my mom, she did a good job with morals, raising us to like if somebody is going to treat you differently based off of things who you are, then like they're not worth it. They're not worth your time.
And I think it's awful when people act that way, because I think having that freedom to freely express yourself and knowing who you are is taken for granted. Like for example, like I'll speak for myself. I'm a straight man. I've always known and I've always acted that way. I mean, obviously I've had insecurities of my own, but there was never a dark cloud hanging over me. Like, what happens if I express myself as a straight man? There was none of that. Right? Can you speak to that, Omar?
Well, I could say that I think there's like a lot of wisdom from this story because like everybody has their own kinds of closets, right?
Yes, exactly.
Like I don't know. For me, like my personal experience would be, I guess, the way I go about my religious beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't want to give a label of how I follow them, but I
Yep.
follow them in my own way.
Yep.
And like some people might not like agree like with my perspective on things, right? But this is the way I do things,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I don't know what I'm trying to say right now.
It's like your own version of yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like I think the wisdom from your story is that like people have a certain way that they want to be, and they just kind of let it. Oh, for me, it's being a game designer.
Yeah.
When I came out of high school, I didn't think about going into game design because I associated nerdy culture with it.
Exactly. So that could be your
You know?
your closet, like telling people that you want to be a game designer, being like, oh, what a.
I ended up just working in like the corporate world for like 5-6 years. I snapped back into reality and realized that this is what I wanted to do.
Right.
You know? But yeah, like thankfully I've never been in too much of a situation where I have to hide a huge secret.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but
Right.
you know, being a game designer isn't treated with the same contempt as like some homophobic.
Of course, no.
I guess
Yeah.
probably the closest relation I could give you would be having a girlfriend, because like that's just not something that like, you know, it's not something you can openly share in my community.
Yes.
Because like you get judged, people
Yep.
like label you and put you in kind of like a box of, oh, he's not like us.
The
You
black
know.
sheep.
The black
Black
sheep,
sheep.
yeah, that whole concept, right?
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the show. That's all the time that we have for this week. But join us again next episode as we conclude our conversation with this week's guest. If you or somebody you know would like to be on the show, hit us up on any of our social media. We are Collective Journey on Facebook. We are Collective Journey on YouTube. We are Collective_Journey on Instagram. And always remember, this is not just my adventure, but it's yours as well. This is our collective.